Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Christian from Raftel TCG. Today we're coming at you with our Blurple Kaido list, updated slightly for OP02. I think it's one of the most fun decks I've played. I think while it heavily relies on the purple cards, I believe having the Blurple leader gives kind of another element that purple is missing with some lower cost cards, and also the new ramp effect that the Kaido leader has over the mono purple one is really fun to play with. So without further ado, we'll go into the card by card. I apologize for the lack of sleeves. We were pulling some cards from other decks real quick just to make the profile, but due to popular demand and a lot of people requesting to see the Blurple list, we're trying to get it out as fast as can. So to start off, we're playing 4 copies of Trafalgar Law. This is something that the purple deck typically didn't really have prior to OP02, while now it has the ability to search with the impel down cards. Prior to that, the first turn play would be to pass if you went first. Now with Trafalgar Law on the Blurple list, we're able to drop a chump blocker and actually be able to accomplish something on our first turn without passing. Now, this is our version of the chump blocker that every deck has, and definitely something you want to play. Next, we're playing 4 copies of Lavita. In typical fashion of purple, or any purple variants, we're going to play a lot of 2k counters, and Lavita is one of those. You'll never play Lavita, but having the ability to counter for 2 is nothing to scoff at, and we'll definitely play any 4k counters, or sorry, 2k counters we have at 4. Next, 4 copies of Kurozumi, another chump blocker that also counters for 1. We just play it to get past early game because typically purple is better in the late game. We want to ramp, we want to survive the early game, and then we want to kill them in the late game. So we're just playing these to kind of get us into the late game. Next, 4 copies of Who's Who. Now, in the mono purple deck, Who's Who isn't that great. It anti-ramps us, and it doesn't really have a great stat line. But in the Blurple version, Who's Who is one of the best cards in the deck. It sticks on the board, you can attach 2 more Dong to swing, but most importantly, you can pop something for basically free. It puts 1 back, and then your leader just sets it right up again as active. So anything that does that in this deck is definitely a mandatory 4 of, or if we can play it, and Who's Who, no different. Definitely want to play 4 of this card. Gets rid of the chump blockers, gets rid of anything 3 or less, and it's great. Next, 4 copies of Sasaki. Like I said, common theme in purple decks, play a lot of 2k counters. Sasaki is one of the better ones just because it gives you the ability to play it and then ramp if you see a lack of a field spell, although typically you're going to want to keep this in hand and counter for 2. So again, another 2k counter. Next, the heart and soul of the deck, Onigashima Island. The best card in the deck. You really want to mulligan your hand to see this. If I don't see this in my opening hand or shortly after, I already know the game is not going to be as great as it can be. This gets you there. It gets you to the late game. It gets you there faster than your opponent. You get to see those big cost guys earlier and then put so much pressure on your opponent that they're just unable to get out of these sticky situations with your big boys on the board. It also helps with the anti-ramp of some of your cards where you're putting something back. This will get it right back for you. So definitely want to see this. Definitely a mandatory 4 of. Next, 4 copies of Boa. Now, while Boa isn't great into the mirror match just because you play a Boa, you put a card underneath it, underneath its gets ability, and then someone plays a king and pops it, and you just lost 5 Don for free. Players love playing into that. So against purple, I suggest keeping it in hand just as a 1k counter, but against a lot of other decks, Boa serves as a card that lets us counter for free. We block an attack, we pitch a counter out of our hand, and then we draw 1. And with all the 2k and 1k counters that we're playing, this lets us cycle through our deck and replace any resources that we may have lost through battle. So if we can keep her on the board, keep that 1 Don either to swing and get us a draw or to block and get us a draw, definitely something much needed to keep our resource grind up. Next, 2 copies of Alti. This is just to round out a nice amount of 2k counters in the deck. You'll never play this card. We're not playing page 1, but definitely something that we want to have in the deck just as a 2k counter. Next, we're playing 4 copies of Queen. Queen is probably the best or one of the best blockers in the game. Countering for 1 and having a 5 cost 6k stat line is nothing to scoff at. And not only that, being able to draw 2 and then pitch something out of your hand is great. We're digging deeper for anything we might need to see. Typically, we're going to want to search out or dig for a higher cost card that we need to out the situation we're in, potentially a king or a Kaido, anything that we need, and definitely a mandatory 4 of great stats, counters for 1, draws cards. Next, I'll just put out the ratio of our king. We're playing 4 copies of the 6 cost and then 2 copies of the 7. I find that most decks are going a little bit more heavy on 4 costs and lower, and typically when you play the 7 cost king, you're not able to resolve its ability to pop 2 and you're just getting rid of 1 card. Now, that being said, there are a lot of occasions, especially against green and potentially some red decks, where 7 cost king will destroy them and get rid of either a blocker plus a Bonnie, or get rid of the Tony plus a Nico. So you definitely want to play king in the deck, but for now we're favoring the 6 cost. Next, we're playing 1 copy of the 9 drop and 3 copies of the 10. I originally had thought that the 9 cost was better in the deck, just because you play the 9, it anti-ramps, but it pops something, so you get 1 more with your Kaido leader, but that's only great if you have something to spend that 1 on, and typically it would be a Blast Breath or another Trafalgar Law, but we're finding that a lot of the times you don't have the ability to do that or to play the Kaido while also having a Trafalgar Law or the Blast Breath in hand. Now, if you have that combination, great, but we're playing around assuming that we only have the ability to play 1 of these cards, so we don't have the combo. So we're favoring the 10 drop just to clear some boards, get everything off, and reset the game state, but with us having a 12 cost on board, or a 12k attacker on board. Lastly, we're going to round out our deck with some counters. We're playing 4 copies of Blast Breath. Blast Breath is great for 1 Dawn and putting 1 back. We're going to counter for 4. 4 is huge. It will get us out of most scenarios, and definitely something to play at 4 of. Mandatory in this deck, especially when you're setting 1 Dawn back with your leader every turn. And then lastly, 2 copies of Judgment of Hell. It's our OP02 update. Blurple hasn't changed too much. The Impel Down cards are great, but they don't really synergize with the blue part of Kaido. You can play a mono purple deck with the Blurple leader, but just to have a little bit more diversity and fun with the deck, we're only going to include the 2 copies of Judgment of Hell from the Impel Down stuff. Judgment of Hell is great, although it anti-ramps, it does give us the ability to counter 2 cards, and if it's a card that attacks twice, we can counter up to 3, sometimes 4 even against green if you counter a Basil plus the leader. So for 2 costs, I think it's probably the best, if not second best, behind the black event for an event card that counters. So definitely want to play this at 2. Definitely want to see it, especially in the late game, but it doesn't do too much for our engine early on, so we're only going to play 2 copies. That's it for the profile, guys. We have a bunch of lists coming out this week, so I appreciate everyone watching. I appreciate everyone who subscribed, and let us know if you have any other questions or lists that you'd like to see. Thanks, guys.